Helen, we have Bill Sander back with us again.
Yes, we do.
And this is fun. I tell you, this has been a gentleman, a songwriter, a musician, an entertainer, philanthropist a little bit. I mean, he just starts every kind of thing in the world.
Author of a book.
Yeah. Founder of an orphanage.
He's an all-around
I'm
wild kind
Let's
of guy.
go home.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. That's enough. Bill Sander.
Welcome.
Hey, it's Bill Sander in the music room. All right. I'm very excited to be here.
Man, I tell you, we talked earlier, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but about the time we spent together doing your album. But it's just good having you back in here and hearing new things from you. I know that you call me and play me new things. You remind me of Dennis Todd a lot of times. The way Dennis used to call me, you'll call and you break into a new song. And it's such an honor to have any artist do that, but especially one that's as prolific as this guy.
Well, he is, because during the break, he says to me, oh, well, I was just having such a hard time because I've got another 16 new songs at least, probably more.
I was thinking you were going to say he wrote a song during the break.
Oh, well, he probably did.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's true.
No, but I think I came up with a new tune on the piano.
So, Bill, you've got a connection that we started talking about earlier with the German Band of Texas.
Uh-huh.
And I'd like for you to kind of go through that again, how that all started, because that was a different part of the show and a different segment.
Sure.
And kind of go through that all again, 'cause I find that very interesting. You're a very unique songwriter that can chart music for an artist.
It's an interesting thing. My very first instrument, probably 6th grade maybe, was trombone. And then in the 8th grade, I went to my folks and I said, I really want to learn to play the piano. And they said, well, all right.
Now, this is all growing up in...
This is growing up all over the country.
Okay.
At that time, actually, I started playing trombone in Alabama and then picked up the piano in Georgia. And but at any rate, I was in 8th grade, and Mom and Dad got me a piano, and they got me a teacher. It was one of Dad's. Dad was a civil engineer for Lockheed, and he got one of his co-workers' wife to come teach me. You still remember her name, I think. Sylvia. I don't really remember a whole lot about Sylvia, except that she was...
That didn't take long.
She was
right on the tip of your tongue, I'm telling you.
Yeah, and she was drop dead gorgeous, and I'm 13.
I had one of those.
She's
like
Louise,
that, yeah.
man. I looked forward to piano lessons, but the truth of the matter was I played piano all the time. If I was on the piano, if I was awake, I was on the piano. As a matter of fact, Mom and Dad would come to me and say, Bill, don't you have something to do besides play piano? And I said, what do you got in mind? They said, well, how's your room? I'd go look at my room, and I'd come back and say, room's fine, and I'd get back to playing piano again. But we only lived in Georgia for about 3 or 4 or 5 more months, and then we moved to Pennsylvania, and we only lived in Pennsylvania for about 9 months, I guess. 10 months? Okay. So
Just to let
my
y'all
mom
know,
is
Bill's
here,
mom
giving
Actually,
me
this camera will be
corrections on
picking
all
her
of
up.
all of my memories. But anyway, I probably had a piano teacher in Pennsylvania for probably about 3 or 4 months, because it took a while just to find one. And then we moved back to Texas, and I was pretty much done with taking piano lessons, except that Mom and Dad let me enroll at TCU on piano, and I had a teacher at TCU who, because I played the piano so much, I was mostly self-taught. So that means pretty much for a classical teacher, I was doing everything wrong all the time.
Oh, no.
And boy, I think she hated me, and the feeling was not exactly mutual, but darn close to it. Thing about it was, I wasn't even able to drive yet. I would have to catch a bus from our home to downtown, and then downtown to TCU, and then TCU back to downtown and back home.
TCU is a college.
TCU is a university, Texas Christian University.
Right.
So I took one semester there.
Oh, were y'all in Haltom City at the time? Or?
No, we were in Oakhurst over in East Fort Worth.
Okay.
But no, yeah, it was great. It was a great opportunity. It just didn't work out. So from then on, I'm pretty much mostly self-taught. But by the time I was a senior in high school, I was accompanying the school chorus. I was pretty much the piano player for Carter Riverside High School.
Wow.
So that was an interesting time, and then I joined the Navy, and they didn't have any pianos where I was stationed, so I went and got a guitar and joined the guys in the barracks and started playing guitar with those guys. So I wound up picking up my third instrument.
So you're left-handed. Did you play a right-handed guitar upside down?
Well,
he's upside down and backwards.
there's a whole lot of upside down in me.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, I bought a guitar. Everybody, it's just a regular guitar. I guess went over to the exchange there, bought a guitar. It was a cheap thing. Probably paid $30 for it. Mm-hmm. And it was a classical guitar, which means there's not any plastic pieces on the front of it. There's no what do you call it?
Pick guard.
Pick guard. There's no pickups. It's not electric at all. So,
gut string.
Yeah, it probably was. And so, because this is 1971. Mm-hmm. So I sit down with them, and they're all playing. They show me how to make chords and do this. And my left hand was okay at making chords, but this hand didn't have any rhythm. I didn't know what was that. It was very frustrating. And so one of the other guitar guys, his name was Mike, blonde-haired guy, and he says, Bill, let's try something with you. You're so left-handed. So we restrung my guitar backwards. This guitar is actually built as a left-handed guitar. Mm-hmm. That means it's just like Randy's guitar, except it points the wrong way.
Right.
So I wound up doing that. So that's how I wound up doing all of that stuff. And I love playing piano. I would consider it my principal instrument at this point. I don't consider myself to be any great shakes with the guitar, but it was worse after I chopped the tip of my little finger off with a saw. But that's grown back now, and I can push a note down.
So we kind of been taking a journey of your growing up and all that, but also we're going to go back to the German Band of Texas. And so what brought you there?
Yeah, well, when I graduated from high school, I knew some of the finest people I've ever known. Simple as that. Our graduating class had 6 people that had never made a B in their life. They were all A students. They ended up giving an English test. Isn't that right, Donnie? It was an English test to see who was going to be valedictorian and salutatorian. And in that group, I tell people I was in the quartile that made the upper 3 quartiles possible. Truth be told, I didn't even know there was such a thing as class standing. I have no idea where I was, and I have no idea what my grades were, and didn't really care just a whole lot about that. But one of the guys I graduated with was a man named Ed Loeb. Ed is a fantastic man. He's a Harvard-trained lawyer, and he absolutely loves German band music. So did my dad. My dad loved German band music.
That's a very eclectic, off in a corner,
Well, it's just a unique deal. Well, about 10 years, see, I hooked back up with Ed in 2013, and we had gone to some kind of a function, I can't remember what, and we ran into each other for the first time in years and years and years. And he comes over to my house afterwards to recruit me to play trombone in his band. About 10 years prior, he had started the German Band of North Texas. And it's just a regular old, it's a German European style band. And in that, we have instruments in it that you don't usually find in an American concert band. Instruments like tenor horns and flugelhorns and those kinds of things. So anyway, excuse me.
They have an accordion. They use accordions.
We do not use an accordion. I guess we could if we had a song that required it. I have an accordion now myself, but I haven't really learned it yet.
Imagine that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool.
Don't start playing it, or you'll have 23 new songs.
Yes, actually, I might write a song about learning the accordion. So anyway,
Squeeze box.
Yeah, there's something about already done, hasn't it? Anyway, so he came over and said, So I looked at all his material. We watched some video. We listened to some songs, and I said, I told my family, I said, man, this is way too fun. I have to do this. And so I joined his band that very day, and I said, listen, as long as you're at the house, come on back to the piano. I'll show you some of my songs. And one of the songs I showed him was a song that I wrote called Desert Fatigues Lending Freedom a Hand, and it's a big patriotic anthem. And it blew him away. He said, play that again, and I did. And he said, if you'll score that for the band, we'll play it. And I thought, how often do you get a deal like that? Ready-made band, just waiting for you to put your music out there so somebody can play it. So not only did that was late 2013, and I started working on it. The thing about it was that it went pretty well, but I had to learn so many new things. I had to learn how to listen, because you don't get to tell the oboe what to play unless you know what he needs to play. Mm-hmm. You got to know the song before you write it down, and there are things about writing writing orchestral music or concert band music, 40 instruments or greater, that there is what you might call color in the music. There is not just the tones and not just the notes, but each of the different instruments has got a different kind of a tone that tone contributes to the overall sound of the band. And some instruments, like clarinets, man, when they're down low, man, they sound so cool. Okay, they're really low. I mean, they're like bass instruments. And then when they get really up high, and they've got a range that's this long, and they get really up high, they almost squeak. I mean, they're so high. And depending on what you write for them is what they're going to sound like. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of things to learn. And then secondary to that, I was the president of the Texas Rotary Chorus in Dallas. And I thought, you know what I want to do? I want to go ahead and write this song for the Texas Rotary Chorus to come over and sing with the band, which they did in the spring concert of 2014. And that was a big old deal, and that's on YouTube.
Oh, neat. We'll have to look that up.
Yeah,
What's it called?
It's called Desert Fatigues, Lending Freedom a Hand.
YouTube.
Make sure you send me a link on it so I can put it on your page.
Yeah.
Too.
Glad to. So, at any rate, that went so well. And I had so much fun doing it and Ed says, Bill, get the next song ready. And so I started working on Valentine Waltz, and then I did Falcons Aflight. And then this last year, not this year, this coming Saturday, we have the concert coming up, but I don't have any original music on that concert because I just didn't get it finished in time. But last year, we did a brand new concert band piece called Submarine on Patrol. And I haven't put it on YouTube yet, but
I remember you playing that.
Well, that song would probably kind of tie into the book you wrote.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I played trombone in the German band in North Texas. I hadn't played trombone since 8th grade when I joined that band. If anybody is listening to this interview, and Randy thinks that you're listening, and I have no reason to doubt him. If you play an instrument, get the darn thing back out and toot on it a little bit. Why not? You got that long of a life? You get to come back and try again? I don't think so. So get out. If you played a saxophone in high school and you still got it in the closet, then take that thing down, get it worked on, and start playing that thing. You remember how to play it. So anyway, I encourage people all the time to do that. So, but it's Submarine on Patrol is a really different kind of song because I use the woodwinds to submerge the submarine at the beginning of the song. Yeah, they go, and then it goes into the march.
Very cool.
So yeah, it worked out pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, songwriting is so subjective of a thing, and when you're able to have people like Bill who can write about things that other people never experience. I mean, how many people have, worked on a nuclear submarine? Not that many.
Nope.
And then also, how many can write songs about it? That narrows it down even more. I
think there's only 4 of us in the whole United States can do it. Maybe not that many.
The filter is thick, there.
So, did that song did that kind of spin off from your book?
No, it's just an idea.
Just an idea?
So tell us about the book and what gave you the idea to do it in the first place.
I am so glad we're talking about the book because my co-author is sitting right next to you.
Okay.
She is fantastic. Her name is Laura Ainsworth. Yes. And I love Laura very much, and she's terrific. So what happened was it was my 60th birthday, and Dee threw a big old humongous birthday party for me, and I was outside. It was kind of a come and go deal, and hundreds of people came by, and I stood outside all day long grilling meat and telling sea stories. That's what we call them from the Navy. Mm. And so whenever the day was over and we're putting everything away and cleaning up and everything, I told Dee, I said, I need to write these stories down before they're lost. And so she agreed. We sat down and made a list of stories. We came up with about 70 stories. And so I started writing. I took the first one and wrote it, the second one and wrote it, and third one and wrote it. I thought, well, even if nobody in the world wants to read this book, at least my kids will know my stories. And so I finished writing all the stories. It took about a year. And then I gave it to my oldest daughter, Suzanne, who was an English teacher over at Bowie High School in Arlington at the time. And I gave it to her, and I said, here, I want you to read this and see what you think about it. And she read about half of it, I think, and then gave it an F and gave it back to me and said, here are the things you need to do to fix it.
Oh, wow.
That'll bless your heart. And so then...
Yeah.
I don't mind. She did the right thing. Because she talked about things that I hadn't heard of since I got out of school.
Right.
May not have even heard about them in school because I wasn't always paying close attention. And things like passive verbs just was my enemy. And so when she did that, I went through and took the next year, and I rewrote the entire book word for word, sentence for sentence. Now it's 2 years into the darn thing. To me, it seems pretty much the same as it was. I'm assuming that it's better. And then I went to Dee and I went to a CD release party for a friend of mine, Deborah Korber, whom you know. Mm-hmm. And so it just so happened that Pat and Laura were at that same deal. So we sat with them, and Laura was all excited. Laura's a writer, and she's a darn good one. And she writes for important people about important things. And she had just finishing out a book for another person. Well, she really at that time, I don't know if it's changed much, but she could only hear out of her right ear. Okay. Now that's changed, right? You can hear out of both ears now? When you have your device in there?
My device.
Okay. Well, what happened was I'm sitting on her right, and I forget which ear it is that she can hear me. And so she's sitting over, she's just not going on and on about how she's excited about this book and da-da-da-da-da. Well, I've got a book I've been working on for 2 years. And I'm sitting over, I'm grousing to myself, and I said, God, I wish I could get somebody to help me with my book. And she heard me. Her head snapped around. I thought, oops. Yeah, I was on the wrong side for she heard me, and she says, you wrote a book? And I said, yes. She says, I'd love to help you with your book. And I said, why? She said, what's it about? I told her. She says, well, yeah, can you get me a copy? I said, well, yeah. So I got her a copy, and about, a week or two later, we're either talking on the phone or emailing each other or something. And she says, well, Bill, she says, I really thought the book was farther along than it was. And I told her, I said, listen, just twist the knife while you got it in there, So I said, let's get together. So the four of us got together for dinner. And I said, I'm going to make you a deal that hopefully you won't refuse it. I said, if you'll help me finish this book, I'll give you a full co-write on it. And so she did, and I did, and we did. And then we won an award from the Artist Music Guild for Author of the Year for my book. The name of the book is The Subpar Adventures of Snakebite and Stonefinger. Mm-hmm. And just kind of a long title, but very weird. And
now, I think I read that before
you
Laura.
read it in an afternoon.
I did.
Yes, you did.
I think you read his draft?
Yes, in an afternoon. And he was back here working on his CD with Randy. And it was, I think, a Saturday, and I just plopped down on the couch. He said, you want to read this? I'm like, sure. And it kept my attention. I read the whole thing. It was a nice story. Funny.
Well, it was a good time. We sold a bunch of books, especially when Laura and I went to the reunion of the Stimson, which was my submarine crew.
Yeah.
So it helped pay for our room and board, some of our gas.
That's awesome. Cool.
Bill, you're also involved with an orphanage
in Uganda.
Kampala, Uganda. And we
Yeah.
talked about this again a little bit in the other segment, but this is worth mentioning again, just because of it shows who you are and what you do. Tell people how you got involved in that. And exactly how you're involved in it.
The nature of the orphanage is a situation that if I take 2 steps back, what really is going on is that I love people. It's true that I own a computer business for 34 years, and I don't care about computers at all. I'm not really a technologist. I'm good at it, but I don't care about it. So the way that I make peace with that is that whenever I go into somebody's office, they're all unhappy because they can't get their work done, and when I leave, they're all happy because they can work again. So that's how I, in my own mind, I kind of make that trip. Well, what ends up happening is that I found out one of my customers introduced me to Rotary International, and I said, Rotary International, that's my kind of deal there, because that's pure altruism, really. And the whole idea is you got business owners and managers that get together and try. When it was created in 1905, the whole idea was that we could have peace in the world by people working together instead of shooting each other. Well, I love that plan.
My dad was in Rotary. Yeah.
So, as a Rotarian, well, I've been a Rotary. I'm a charter member of the club I'm in, which means I was there when it first cranked up. And by the way, I wrote a song for that too. It was called
Imagine that.
Sunset is the Best. It was to the tune of Sunrise Sunset from Fiddler on the Roof. And, it was kind of poking fun at the other Rotary clubs, because I said, you can all these Rotary meets at all times of the day, but sunset is the best. So at any rate, a fellow Rotarian named Betty Bingo, who was a member of actually another club. She was a member of Great Southwest. I'm a member of Sunset. And so, but she started coming to our club because she had so much fun. It was just really fun for her. Tuesday nights were easy for her, and she stopped by on her way home, and we were only an hour, 6 to 7. So she came over. Well, that year, that was 2015, she came over and joined our Christmas party. And at the Christmas party, we found out about Malaika Orphanage because Betty Bingo founded the orphanage in her family compound in Kampala, Uganda, which is the capital of Uganda. And so we sat there, the whole group of us just sat there spellbound, listening to her tell stories and stories and stories and stories and stories about these children, where they come from, how they deal with them, and so on and so forth. They educate them, feed them. Well, at that point, at that time, the orphanage was about 5 years old. There's about 180 kids, I guess. And so we're driving home from the Christmas party, and Deanne says, we really need to sponsor a kid. And I said, yeah, I know. So we were going to do that. Well, about 2 weeks later, she passed away. And so I went ahead and sponsored a couple of kids instead of just one. And then this happened and that happened, and was getting really... Betty had been doing all of the funding of that orphanage by herself for 5 years. And I said, this woman needs some help. And so I kind of threw in with her and started going and helping try to do this and that and the other. And I wound up becoming, and at this time, I'm still the chairman of the board of directors of the foundation. We're a 501c3. We now have, instead of 880, we got 219 children. About a third of our children are HIV positive from their mothers birthing them improperly. There's a way, even an HIV woman can birth a child without it having HIV if it's done properly. But most of the time, these women are very, very primitive. Whole country is primitive. And they go out in the woods and just have their baby and then come back, and it's... they've kind of damaged their child. For the longest time, there was nothing we could do about it. We don't have the money for drugs for HIV-positive kids. But very recently, like 2 months ago, a organization that deals with HIV for kids has been in Kampala and has been treating our children at no cost to us. So very, very, oh my gosh, I heard that, I started crying. I thought that is just an answer to prayer as it can be. Yeah. So I haven't been to Uganda yet. My purpose in life for the orphanage is to help fund it. So right now we've got an an 8. By the way, they have a pretty good size with a large wall around it. Not going political, but walls really do work. Mm-hmm. It keeps out the bad guys. I tell you what, in Uganda, they steal our babies and kill them for sacrifices. It's Old Testament bad stuff. Yeah. And in fact, our latest child, his name is Bruce. He came to us by means of somebody wrapped him up in a blanket and threw him over our wall. Wow. And he still had the umbilical cord attached. So, there's thousands of orphanages in the world in third world countries. There just are. Mm-hmm. I can't do anything about the rest of them, but I can certainly do something about that one. And thus starfish thrower, yeah. So I married a starfish thrower too. Kim is fantastic.
Yes, she is. She did good.
So that's how I got involved with the orphanage. I'm pleased to be there. We haven't been over there yet, but I will. Yeah, I've got videos. We're working on trying to put together some promotional materials and really try to improve our approach. I've been building the board of directors, and one of our board of directors got arrested not very long ago. Uh-oh. So that wasn't very helpful. But you know about that, right? Yeah, for having a giant Ponzi scheme.
Oh, no.
He was on your board of directors.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
But I continue to pray for my friend, but he can't really attend any of the meetings anyway. Yeah. So, but anyway, I'm really proud of the orphanage. It's making a difference. We're probably one of the largest orphanages in Uganda, and I've written 3 songs. Starfish Thrower was one of the songs I wrote for the orphanage. I also wrote a song called Malaika Means Angel, which in Swahili it really does. Mm-hmm. And so, and it kind of tells the story of the orphanage, and it's pretty.
Well, Betty's wonderful. We had the opportunity to meet her.
We did a show with Bill and her raising money for SPCA, wasn't it?
Yeah, when you were doing SPCA stuff,
yeah. We were doing that.
Yeah.
And y'all came and you came and gave of your time for it, and that's when we met her, if I remember right.
You just you're a blessing to so many people, not only the singer-songwriter and musical community, but so far beyond that. And
he's a blessing to me.
We are just so blessed to know you and call you a friend.
Thank you. I receive that. I'm humbled by it. I do have an interesting story for you. Okay. Especially for the people that are hearing this that are Christians. If you're not a Christian, it's okay. I don't have anything against non-Christians. I was a non-Christian until I became a Christian. But at any rate, when I was writing Submarine, I wrote Submarine for 5.5 years. That's what my book is about. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I wrote Submarine for 5.5 years. That's 7 patrols at about, 4 or 5, 6 months, depending on per patrol. And almost every patrol, what would happen is some sailor on board would come to me and he'd say, "Bill, I want to talk with you." I'd say, "Okay." And he would tell me what his problems were. And I said, "Well, it sounds like you just need to get yourself together with the Lord and get these things worked out." And they'd say, "Well, can we do that?" And I said, "Sure." And so we call, in Christian circles, we call that leading someone to the Lord. And I led at least one man to the Lord every patrol. But one patrol, I led 10 men to the Lord. I don't know what was going on in that patrol, but it was strange. When we came back, I went to all of these different churches watching these men get baptized. Craziest thing you ever saw. Well, 2 years ago...
How many people on your sub?
Well, there's about 110 enlisted and about 20 officers, so about 130 men altogether. Some are better looking than others.
Submarines or the guys?
The guys.
Okay.
Actually, the submarine too, actually, but that's a different story. So, but anyway, what happened was, when Laura and I went in 2016 to the reunion, to the Stimson reunion, one of the couples that came up to us was Bill Hines and his beautiful bride, and he was always Chief Hines to me when we were on the boat. Mm-hmm. And at this point he's Mr. Hines, but he's Chief Hines to me really the rest of my life. He comes up to me and says, "Bill, I'm so glad you're here. We've been waiting for you to come to this because I wanted to talk to you. And I said, really? He says, yeah. I said, well, what's up? He says, do you remember leading me to the Lord? I was one of those 10 guys. And I said, well, I don't really remember who they all were at this point. It's been a long time. Mm-hmm. He says, Bill, you were the first person to ever ask me the right question, to get me to think the right thoughts, to even consider my circumstances about the Lord. And I said, well, that's cool. And so he said, I was called into the ministry. He said, I've been preaching all over the world, and every time I give my testimony, they hear the name Bill Sanner.
Oh, wow.
And I had goosebumps up one side and down the other of my body. You know,
Wow.
That's kind of such a strange kind of a deal.
That's powerful.
Yeah. So you don't know. I started our Laotian ministry by inviting our neighbors' children to go to Sunday school with us. And that Sunday school that I started grew to more than 100 and became 5 different congregations. People are hungry, people are wanting, and they, you know, there are times that you can do things. That's not me at all. That's a God thing if there ever was any.
You know when it's time. I mean, you know when it's time to walk through the door, though.
Well, you know, you got to be willing. That's for sure.
I'm talking about you as following the Lord. You know when it's time when He tells you to do something.
I called it doing the obvious thing.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it was the obvious thing was to go across the street and meet our neighbors. They were brand new. We didn't know them before, and turned out they were Laotian. And then, you know, they had 2 small children. We said, listen, if you'd like, we'd be glad to take your children to Sunday school with us on Sunday. And they said, oh, please do. We want them to know the American God. I said, I want them to know the American God, too.
He's universal.
Well, that didn't matter to them. They knew a God over in Laos called Buddha, and he's not even a God.
Right.
You know, he doesn't profess to be a God, but at any rate. So at some point along the way, I had the opportunity to lead them to become Christians, and then started the Sunday school class. And in those days, I was in Laotian home 5 and 6 nights a week, every week. Wow. And doing what we would now call social work. That word hadn't even been coined in 1980, 1981. And so I would come home from work, and Deanne would meet me at the door with Mr. So-and-so needs to do this, and Mrs. So-and-so needs that, and Mrs. Boonmi needs to go to the hospital. And I'd say, why does she need to go? Remember Mrs. Boonmi? She didn't weigh 80 pounds wet. I'm telling you what, there wasn't anything to her. And she couldn't breathe, and so I put her in my 280ZX, and I raced her to the hospital. And then I picked her up and I carried her into the hospital, and I said, this woman doesn't speak English and she can't breathe. Help her now. Mm-hmm. So she always thought that I saved her life. She always kept us in these little Asian peppers that, you know, you can start fires just by touching paper with them.
Oh, wow.
Holy smokes, those are hot. So at any rate, I during the whole process of that, I learned the language. So now at this point, after 40 years, I speak and read Laotian fluently, and I've never been to Southeast Asia. So here I have a whole group of people from Southeast Asia. I got a whole group of people from Africa, and I'm just over here trying to figure out what to do next.
Well,
so
it sounds like you probably need to get on a plane and take a few trips.
Yeah, that's nothing that a little money won't fix.
Hey, you know what?
I know this guy named Jesus who owns all that money.
You know, and that's exactly right. And I'm not exactly, you know, doing nothing about nothing, but you know what, the Lord's timing is His timing, not mine.
That's right.
So I'm perfectly happy with that.
Bill, thanks for coming over tonight, and you've never not been a part of what we're doing since we started, but to have you back in here and have some of your new things, it's really nice.
Did you like my new Texas song?
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is a Texas song,
I
isn't
do.
it?
And I actually remember you calling me about that one and playing that one too.
That sounds right.
I remember that phone call. I didn't remember the song until you started playing it. Then I'm like, okay, yeah, I remember that phone call.
Yeah.
But we want to thank all the people that have come tonight in the audience, studio audience, and Gabby and Reno back in the back. Helen, thank you. Bruce Davis. Jen and Barbara not here, but God, you're a part of everything we do. And you're in the music room with Bill Sanner.
And Randy Treadway.
And Helen Treadway. And all the good folks.
Oh, all of these good folks. Thank you so much for having me tonight. It's my pleasure.